Hello there, come back to the Techno Innovation Hub. It's going to be the 8th session on Oracle Architectural Journey Explanation. And let me share the screen. We have been discussing program global area and user global area. So this is what we were discussing as the last slide, how the client process, user process, client process or the user process and the server process and the PGA all works together. And yeah, and we discussed the large pool behavior and the UGA behavior between dedicated server and shared server environments. Let's continue. I think now we have almost come to the last portion of basic memory structure. So we have been explaining the memory structures at a high level, definition level. So the last thing on memory structure, that is known as software code areas. Software code areas. This is what software code area. So this is, as you can see, Oracle database code is stored in a software area that is typically more exclusive and protected than the location of user programs. So this is all about the Oracle binaries. I mean, you can install various softwares in your host machine. Let's say if you have Oracle Enterprise Edition, it will be that, and then Oracle Grid Infrastructure, or likewise. But we have to make sure that we are not going to install all the, different softwares in the same host. That's a different story. But anyway, with whatever the install software, this is they are talking about the kernel. The software required to make sure the stuffs are working within the database. That's what they are telling. So more exclusively and protected. So than the location of user programs. So these things are not usually updating unless the software update is going, patching is going, or another new software being installed likewise. So software areas are usually static in size, changing only when software is updated or reinstalled. The required size of these areas varies on operating system. That's true. And software areas are read-only and can be installed, shared, or unshared. And that's right, because various software, depending on the OS support, it can be shared and unshared. When possible, database code is shared so that all users can access it without having multiple copies in the memory. That's true. Not only for database, even now, I may remember the old days, we have the forms, reports, and those things also. Just having a single copy installed in a single page can be shared. So there are techniques, but it depends on the operating system support as well. And multiple instances of a database can use the same database code area with different databases if running on the same computer. This option of installing software shared is not available in all operating systems. The option of installing software shared in a shared installing in shared manner is not supported by all. For example, Windows operating system, it might not support certain sharing techniques. Likewise, anyway, so software code area, so that also comes under separate memory structure in Oracle database under memory structures, software code areas. Fine. Yes, with that, I think we have completed the memory structures. So this is the journey we had for memory structures. We had SGA explanations, we had PGA, UGA, and finally the software code area. And now we are going to start the basic process architecture. So under process architecture, we are going to discuss the client processes and server processes and background processes. Of course, high-level overview is completed for basic memory structures. High-level overview is completed for basic memory structure. That is, these four areas being covered, but not the deep dive high level. It's still the component interactions we haven't done, or neither deep dive we haven't done. We have done certain theoretical deep dive for this PG and UGA, but for SGA component is still remaining. So even under basic process architecture, so we have covered a little bit about server process. Understanding is there, but we need to see some practicals, how the server client process starts, how the server process starts. And about background process also, we got to know the compulsory background process and optional background processes. Okay, let's continue to the basic process architecture now. Because Oracle instance architecture, database architecture, the main thing is memory structures, then comes the process architecture, the background process, client process, and server process. Okay, let's continue. So basic process architecture. The first thing is client processes. Client processes. So we know what is a client process. Up to now, we know that because we saw it even in the previous explanation, in the PG explanations, I mentioned that you have something called user process or the client process, and the server process is there. The server process can be dedicated or shared. So we know certain information, but let's try to dig in more. When a user runs an application such as SQL Plus, the operating system creates client process. Understood? We know that. Sometimes called as the user process. To run user application, that is the end user level or the client process, using whatever the tool he wanted to connect to the database. The client application has Oracle database libraries linked into it. In that linked into it that provides the APIs required to communicate with the database. Understood? If it is SQL, it has the relevant compiler, SQL engine, and how it going to work with the database, link APIs, application program interface, and those things are there. That is understood basically to communicate with the database name. And the Oracle's processes servicing the client process can read from and write to the SGE. Now this is client processes on the client side, and the server side we have the Oracle processes or the server process. So that is interacting with the database instance. This client process cannot directly interact with the database instance. So the Oracle's database side, the server process is the one which interacts with the database. That's what it is, whereas the client process cannot interact with the instance. The client process can run on a host other than the database host. That's true. Whereas Oracle process cannot. A client process can run on a host other than the database host, whereas Oracle process cannot. Yeah, the server process must run on the database side. Where the instance runs, that is where the Oracle server process is running. So that is what they are telling. Right. So this is example. You can see connect sys. Now this is at sign. We can connect without that sign. So this is just using that sign. Now we are using a service. This is to indicate that this connection is using a TNS service. That is TNS is transfer network substrate, or it is an indication that is connecting not from the same host. Not from the machine where the database is running. It is coming from a remote end. It's not a local connection. It's a remote connection. That's what this service does. As 6 dBA, that's fine. And here, just to check that one, on the client side, we should have the client process. So this is client user. Whatever the user you are using in the client side will appear here, maybe Oracle or whatever. And the process ID is there, client process ID. And likewise, so we have the details. So we can take a look at it. We have the parent process ID and the process ID. And this is on the client side. So client side, we have a separate PI process ID. And on the server side, so actually client side, the SQL Plus is the tool here. That's why it shows SQL Plus. And on the server side, we should have the server process ID. So that's what it says. So this is local normies. That's why it is a remote connection. So, and the connection. And so we have to do some practical to understand in more detail. This is just an example I have given in the slide. So let's try to do some practical on this, just to understand how this client and the server process, the process IDs and those things are coming in. So this is a document I have created. So the very first thing is, yeah, this is what is in the slide. So let's try to use that. Yeah, this should be first let's create a local service. That's okay. So I wanted to connect like this. Let me exit from here. So I am going to connect like this, whatever password. Now this is a local connection. I didn't use a service. Nothing is used, just say system Oracle, and it is connecting to the same machine. So I am my database also here, and I am using the same terminal in the same machine, and I'm using SQL Plus to connect to the database. So everything is going to be local here. Now, for me to find more details, we can just simply give this command ps minus ef grep like this. So let's copy that command here. I think let's adjust this command because my database is not name is not sample. So let's open another window, right? Third window, that is fine. Yeah, either window is okay. Let's open up a third window here. All right, so let's clear it. I'm on the root, so I wanted to find out these details. I'm pasting it, but let's amend it here. This is my database name is not sample. I'm using something called, we can just check it here, select name from VDollar database. Yeah, I'm using TNH19DB. That is my database name. So I'm giving it here TNH19DB. Let's call this one. Okay, I wanted to extract the details. Okay, now you can see that command will extract. Now you can see a lot of processes here. But what is important for us now, you can see these all are background processes. ORA, see, OLA, PMON, SMON, memory manager, DB writer, all are background processes. But we are not worried about the background because each background process also creates a server process. So that's a we have the examples are here. See, these all are server process IDs for the background process because that also creates a PGA. And we know that. But on behalf of our connection, now we have one connection here. No? Now it should be a local connection. SQL plus local, yes, this is our connection. Now this is another remote connection I am having because I think I have connected using SQL developer also. So this is my connection. You can see I have description local, yes. So because I am connecting in the same machine, local, yes. And so this is my server process, and you can see my server process ID is here. This is my server process ID. This one, that is my server process, and this is my client process on behalf of that. This is my client process. So I am having the user process and the server process on the same machine because I am using the local connection. So it says local, yes. Okay, now this connection local no means that is I am using a remote connection. So I can let me just okay, let's create a new remote connection because I have SQL developer. This is from Windows I have connected. So this is from Windows I have connected using a service. I can disconnect this one. Let's disconnect it. So if I disconnect it, now I won't be able to see that now. Earlier this is there, no, Oracle local, no, that is a remote connection. If I repeat that command again, now I should not see that one. It is gone. You can see it is gone. Now only my local connection, just the same connection. This connection I have made it here is available for me. That's all. So let's confirm those things. Anyway, now this is to get the idea about this is the client process which is using SQL tool. And this is the server process on behalf of the request, and it has created the server process. So let's confirm those in more detail when you dig into more. Okay, so as per our practical, now next is we can use a remote service. Now this is a local connection we made. No, of course, this using a service, but I didn't use a service. I just right away connected. You saw that. Now the next step is let's connect using a service like this. Let's use this method. Now this will indicate as of I am connected remotely. So let's exit from here. So okay, let's leave it as it is, doesn't matter. I'm going to connect. Now this time I am using a service. So it's like I am connecting from a remote machine. Okay, now if I requery that one, so that connection should be there now. I exited from the previous one, but yeah, I type exit command. So now I should have Only that one. Local, no. Earlier you remember it was local, yes. This one, local, yes. Local, yes. That's the reasoning, because I connected earlier without a service, a local connection. But now I connected using a service, so it's like coming from a remote machine. So now I have the same information, no changes for the SQL plus. It is I'm using SQL plus client tool to connect. But the only thing is a remote connection, local no. So server process also being created, user process, client process also being created. Fine, so that's a remote connection, and I can have another remote connection from SQL developer if I want. So let's continue the practical as it is. Further, what is this? Verify the server process and the user process. Yeah, we can type this command. Further, we can verify the servers and the user process. So this small command is giving select a dot shadow process ID SPID as dedicated server from b dot process a dot b dot process client PID. So what it does actually, it is using this VDoLA processes alias a VDoLA session, because in VDoLA session will give the session information. VDoLA processes will give the process information on the operating system side. And we can connect these two using the process address. Now B means in session, VDoLA session, we have the process address, and in what is A is our processes. VDoLA process, we have address. So using these two columns, we can connect each other, and we can find the server process ID and the user process ID. So let's try this command here. You can see, yeah, now it should tally the information. Now here it says what is my, for this session, I am using my stat, no, VDoLA my stat. VDoLA my stat is given as of now for the current session. What is the session ID for the current session? So it's using that one. And it says, now if I just compare this information, now you can see my dedicated server process ID is what? Process ID is 16879. So I should have, yeah, you can see this is my server 16879. Local no. And what is my client process is 16877. Yes, 16877. That is what. So it's very clear. Same information is given here, and from the query also I can get the information. So now it is obvious that you have a separate server process and a separate client process will get created on behalf of a connection. So let's continue, and you can see the two columns, and we can go in more detail with the process address as well. Yeah. So now here anyway it use the process address, no, ADDR address from VDoLA process and process address from VDoLA session. It matching these two, because this gives the database side information, this gives the OS side information. So we can match because both process IDs are same. Process ID means not the process ID. Both session, both the addresses are same. Process addresses are same. Now here we are talking about the process IDs. No, here we talk about the process address. So VDoLA session process address equals VDoLA process address. So let's check those things. Now you can see we can go into more details with process address as well. Connect to SQL developer, fine. We can use SQL developer. We have the information. We can even using from these sessions also we can. And what is this? Select process address program from VDoLA session. P address means address of the process that owns the session. That's true. I mentioned that now. That is the process address of the current session. And yeah, we can take it from VDoLA session. And address means address of process state object, that is at OS level. So what we can do, we can simply take this command and select okay, so let's try it. And I think now we use SQL plus as a client tool. No? Now we understood, I mean, 2 times we watch SQL plus, no? SQL plus as a client tool. Now we can check it with SQL developer. Let's connect from SQL developer. Okay, I'm going to connect from SQL developer. So this is a connection from SQL developer, which will this SQL developer running on Windows, and it is coming from coming to my Linux machine 192.168.1.12. That is my Linux machine with the VirtualBox I am running in. So I can check that run from here. This is my IP address. You can see 192.168.1.12. That is my Linux box. Other one I am connecting from Windows. SQL developer is running on Windows, so that's okay. And now the connection is there, so we can check it on SQL Plus. So what is being asked to check here? This one. Let's check. Let's go to our practical. In practical, it says select this one. Let's check it. Process address and program from video session. So let's check that one, because our program the program will give the client tool name actually. Now that's why we are taking the program. So it should say, you can see the programs, SQL developer. I have a connection for SQL developer. And now you can see the process address for that, let's say C338. C338 is the address. So now this is from, I am checking from video session, database level. And I can take the same from video process as well. So these two should be equal actually. I should have the relevant process for the relevant session. So if I check that one, so you can see here 338, and what was our process ID here? The process ID for SQL developer. If you the process ID is 338, C338, SQL developer. And from video processes, if I check, this is from video session. I'm already task created the session, and video processes, if I check, it has the same process ID should be there. This one, C338. Program name gives a different name under video process, but video session gives the correct program name. So you can see on behalf of that particular session, the same process ID, not the process ID, the same process address is available. So on the session also the same process address is available, and on the OS also the same process address is available. So it's matching each other. So we will dig into these addresses in the upcoming session in more detail, because that is also very important. And yeah, so that is to get the address. And now I think you got an idea how these server process and the user process or the client process get created, and it has separate process IDs as well as addresses, process addresses. Okay, so this is another command. If you want, we can get the shadow process ID and shadow thread ID, program from video process order by SPID. That's okay. That the shadow process ID and thread ID, because from 19C onward we have multi-threaded, not 19C, even in 12.2 onwards, 12.2 onwards we have the multi-threaded support for Oracle database. So that's why we have the thread ID, shadow thread ID other than process ID. So let's talk about that one later. Okay, so I just want to give you an idea about this user process and the server process, and how do you identify the separate process ID like this for the server process, and how to identify the separate process ID for client process. Now each one will have separate PIDs, process IDs, because every time in dedicated environment, every time a connection established means a process ID will get created, dedicated. One client process ID, one server process ID. My server also dedicated. And in upcoming practical, in the next session, we will check it. Now here we have used local machine connection, because I did 2 connections I made using SQL Plus in the local machine, but 1 connection I made using a service ID. So it looks like remote, but this SQL developer I am running on Windows. So this is on Windows. Yes, answer. This is on Windows I am running. See, it's all about Windows. So this is on Windows I am running. So I made this connection from Windows to Linux database. That is a kind of a remote connection. But if you want, we can make a connection from Linux to Linux. We can install SQL Plus on a Linux box, and we can connect it to a our Linux database. So let's try it in the next session, and we need to understand a little bit detail about this process address and the session address. So that I will demonstrate in on the next session. I think, yeah. So let me just check whether, yes, so now this is understood. Client and server process IDs are understood. Yes, up next we have further on the same client process, we have the database connection and a session information. And let's do another practical to understand a connection and a session. These are two different things because one connection can have many sessions. So let's try to understand that one in the next session. All right, have a great time. Right, bye bye.